The blizzard's fury. The wind shrieked, a mournful cry that chipped away at Fitzwilliam's grit. No longer a playful dance of flakes. The snow was a biting onslaught, scouring his face and swallowing what little light remained. The stagecoach creaked and shuddered, a timbered beast wrestling a glacial phantom. Buster, typically a whirlwind of nervous energy, was a cowering shadow at Fitzwilliam's feet, a low, guttural whine vibrating from his chest, his warmth a small comfort against the chill seeping through the driver's boot. "Steady, lad," Fitzwilliam rasped, the words swallowed by the tempest's fury. He tightened his grip on the reins, knuckles gleaming like bone. The horses, usually paragons of reliability, were jittery, their breath erupting in plumes of anxiety. The world beneath was vanishing beneath an ever-thickening shroud. Each blast threatened to shove the coach off the barely their track. Fitzwilliam wrestled for control, his muscles burning with the strain. He knew this road intimately, every hollow, every hump, every wicked bend. But the blizzard was obliterating the familiar terrain, turning it into a stark, white void. The first hint of real predicament arrived subtly. A faint tug, a moment's hesitation in the horse's pace. Fitzwilliam flicked the whip lightly, more suggestion than order. They responded, heaving forward, but the resistance lingered, deepening. He strained to see through the swirling white chaos, desperate to pinpoint the problem. "Blast and damnation," he muttered, identifying the culprit just as the coach bucked violently. A snowdrift, a frozen wave sculpted by the gale, barricaded their path. The horses labored, their hooves churning fruitlessly in the mounting snow. The wheels whirred, spitting out powder, yet remained resolutely mired. Fitzwilliam hauled back on the reins, halting the team. He descended from his perch, plunging knee-deep into the snow. The wind pounced, stealing his breath and frosting his skin. Buster whimpered again, nudging his wet nose into Fitzwilliam's hand. "Stay put," Fitzwilliam commanded, the words dissolving in the wind's roar. He floundered to the front of the coach, sizing up the obstacle. The drift was formidable, easily chest-high, and compacted into granite by the unyielding wind. The horses were flagging, their sides heaving like bellows. He needed to act, and fast. He contemplated digging them out, but the maelstrom filled his excavations as quickly as he could make them. He stole a glance towards town, or rather, in the general direction he believed it lay. The blizzard had swallowed the world whole. He knew they weren't distant, perhaps a few hours more if the weather had held its peace. But now they were marooned. The realization struck him with staggering force. Stranded with the medicine. He scrambled back into the coach, his movements awkward and sluggish in the deepening snow. Buster bounded to meet him, his tail offering a tentative wag. Fitzwilliam stroked the dog's thick fur, a humorless smile twisting his lips. "We're in a spot, boy," he said, his voice strained. "A right proper spot." He retrieved the heavy canvas bag holding the medicine. He knew precisely the number of doses remaining, sufficient to treat the most vulnerable, the children and the elderly. Every wasted hour was another hour the sickness had to fester, another hour sapping the strength of those already weakened. He pictured Mrs. Abernathy, her delicate frame ravaged by fever, her grandchildren clinging to her skirts, their faces ashen with dread. He envisioned young Thomas, his cough rattling in his tiny chest, cradled in his mother's arms. He recalled all the faces etched with worry and desperation that had lined the streets as he departed, their hopes a heavy burden on his shoulders. He couldn't betray them. He wouldn't. He rummaged through the coach's storage, discovering a shovel and a small axe. He wrestled on his bulkiest gloves and swathed a scarf around his face, leaving only his eyes visible. "All right, Buster," he said, his voice muffled by the wool. "We're going to have to walk it. I'll try to forge a path and coax the horses along." Buster gazed at him, his intelligent eyes brimming with concern. He seemed to grasp the severity of the situation, his usual high spirits replaced by a solemn resolve. Fitzwilliam wrenched open the coach door, and the storm surged in, a frigid wave that stole the air from his lungs. He hesitated, a heartbeat, casting a look back at the coach's warm interior, a meager sanctuary in the swirling chaos. He understood the stakes. The blizzard might intensify. They could wander astray, succumb to the cold. But he had no other course. He had to deliver the medicine to the town. He plunged out into the storm, shovel in hand, Buster glued to his heels. The snow reached almost to his waist, rendering each stride a grueling ordeal. The wind clamored in his ears, a relentless, numbing roar. He could barely see a few feet ahead. He began to dig, his movements slow and laborious. He cleared a narrow path, just enough for the horses to navigate. He knew it was a losing battle, that the gale would reclaim the path as quickly as he carved it. But he had to act. He had to maintain momentum. After what felt like an age, he paused, his muscles screaming in agony. He glanced back at the coach, a blurred shape barely discernible in the swirling white. He glanced at Buster, his fur caked with snow, his tail drooping low. He glanced at the horses, their heads bowed against the gale, their breath rasping. They were trapped. Utterly trapped. And the town, his town, was counting on him. Trapped and despairing. The shovel struck the snow bank with a muffled thump. Fitzwilliam grunted, each exhalation a frosty plume in the biting air. He strained, flinging a pathetic amount of snow to the side, only to watch the gale instantly reclaim it, deepening the trench he was carving. Buster's cold nose pressed into Fitzwilliam's palm, a whine vibrating in his chest. The dog's dark eyes mirrored the anxiety gnawing at Fitzwilliam. "Steady, boy," Fitzwilliam croaked, his voice raw. A perfunctory scratch behind the ears offered scant comfort. The dog sensed the truth. This struggle was becoming a torment of futility. He was pitted against a force of nature, a ravenous white beast intent on entombing them all. Driven by raw desperation, he swung the shovel again. He pictured the stagecoach, not as transport, but as a frigid mausoleum, the life-saving medicines locked inside, hopelessly out of reach. He saw the wan, fever-stricken faces of his neighbors, their hope dwindling with the daylight. Another scoop, another icy gust, undoing what little he'd managed. The blizzard was an implacable enemy, its icy breath a taunt. Changing tack, he attempted to clear the wheels, hoping for purchase. The drifts, however, were insurmountable, hardened by the relentless wind. Each shovelful felt like leaden weight. His muscles screamed. His back protested with sharp stabs of pain. His lungs burned with exertion. He paused, leaning on the shovel, his frame shaking uncontrollably. The wind keened, a sorrowful lament that permeated his very core. He glanced at Buster, now pressed against him, shivering despite his thick coat. A wave of despair threatened to engulf him. He was failing, he was condemning them. Mrs. Abernathy's image flashed in his mind, her frail body racked by coughs, her eyes pleading. Then young Thomas, barely a man, his cheeks flushed with fever, clutching his mother's hand. He recalled the doctor's dire pronouncements, the urgency in his summons for supplies. That urgency had been his engine driving him into the teeth of the storm, fueled by duty and resolve. But now, confronted by this impenetrable wall of white, that iron will began to fracture. Again he swung the shovel, Thomas's hopeful gaze his motivation. Dig, heave, toss. Dig, heave, toss. The motion was robotic, devoid of spirit. The snow continued its descent, an unrelenting curtain that veiled the world. The wind howled, a persistent reminder of their isolation. He lost his footing, the shovel skittering away. He crumpled to his knees in the snow, the frigid dampness leaching through his trousers, numbing him. Buster whimpered, licking his face, the warm rasp of his tongue a fleeting comfort in the frozen wasteland. "I can't," Fitzwilliam breathed, the words swallowed by the gale. "I can't." He closed his eyes, conjuring his town, the familiar faces, the soothing sounds of daily life. He pictured the church spire, a hopeful landmark piercing the sky. But now the spire seemed distant, inaccessible, consumed by the storm's fury. He saw his humble home, the fire crackling merrily in the hearth, the aroma of baking bread sweet in the air. He imagined returning, broken, to meet the accusing stares of his neighbors. He envisioned the silence that would blanket the town as the disease spread its shadow. The thought was unbearable. He forced himself upright, his muscles screaming in protest. He snatched up the shovel, his grip tightening on the worn handle. He looked at Buster, his steadfast companion, his sole solace in this icy inferno. "We have to try," he rasped, his voice rough yet resolute. "We have to keep trying." Even as he uttered the words, a chilling uncertainty crept into his heart. Was it already too late? Had the storm already triumphed? Buster's dash into the white. The wind was a banshee wail, each gust eroding his resolve. Fitzwilliam huddled lower, face pressed into Buster's dense coat. The dog offered frail comfort, a living, breathing warmth amid the tempestuous, white void. Usually a whirlwind of playful energy, Buster was uncharacteristically quiet, tail tucked low, tremors rippling through him where he pressed against Fitzwilliam's leg. His faint whimpers were swallowed by the storm's ravenous roar, evaporating like ghosts in the frozen air. Fitzwilliam tightened his embrace, seeking refuge from the encroaching chill. "Easy, boy," he rasped, the reassurance ringing false even to himself. The cold burrowed deep, a gnawing ache that transcended the mere temperature. It was the icy grip of potential failure, the dread of what might be. He straightened, jaw clenched. Forward was the only option. Mrs. Abernathy's pallid, drawn face rose in his mind, an insistent reminder. He wouldn't fail them. He couldn't. One step, then another. Each advance was a hard-won victory against the gale's ferocity, a testament to his obstinate will. The driven snow needled his exposed skin, stealing his breath in ragged gasps. Visibility was down to mere yards, the world shrunk to a swirling, blinding vortex. Buster offered another whine, a low rumble of unease. His cold nose nudged Fitzwilliam's hand, followed by a tentative lick. A disquieting anxiety shadowed the dog's movements, deeper than just the cold's bite, some instinctual dread. Fitzwilliam halted, scanning the maelstrom around them. "What is it, boy? What do you sense?" But there was only the relentless white, a canvas of furious flakes. Then, an abrupt change. Buster's ears pricked, rotating like radar dishes. His muscles coiled, ready to spring. He pulled against the makeshift leash, a length of rope biting into Fitzwilliam's belt, with newfound, desperate strength. "Easy now," Fitzwilliam managed, his voice tight. He tugged back, but Buster remained unyielding, a statue carved from urgency, eyes locked on some unseen point. Suddenly, a sharp, excited bark, shredded by the wind, and Buster surged forward. The rope snapped taut, nearly appending Fitzwilliam. He flailed, scrambling for purchase, clinging to the rope as Buster dragged him onward. "Buster! Heel!" His command was lost in the storm's savage cry. He struggled for balance, but the dog was a locomotive of worry pulling him into the storm. With a final, jarring yank, the rope slipped from Fitzwilliam's frozen fingers. He could only watch, powerless, as Buster bolted into the white abyss, his form dissolving into the swirling snow. "Buster!" Fitzwilliam's cry was laced with raw panic. He stumbled forward, attempting to follow, but the blizzard was too consuming. He could see nothing, hear nothing but the wind's incessant shriek. He stood alone, utterly and terrifyingly alone. He sank to his knees, the crushing weight of failure threatening to suffocate him. The medicine, lost. His faithful companion, gone. And now himself, adrift and swallowed by the storm, with no glimmer of hope. He closed his eyes, yielding to the despair that clawed at him. What was the point of resistance? The storm would claim everything eventually. It always did. But then, a spark of defiance flickered within. Surrender was not an option. Not while a sliver of a chance remained, however faint. He owed it to his neighbors, to their trust. He owed it to Buster. He opened his eyes, the stinging, "Buster!" Fitzwilliam's cry, a ragged tear in the swirling white abyss, vanished unheard. Gloves stiff as boards, he framed his mouth against the gale. "Buster! Here, boy!" The blizzard remained his sole respondent, a shrill, mournful keen that devoured his pleas, pulverizing them into the tempest. He pivoted, the medicine bag a leaden weight against his side, a solemn vow made manifest. Each icy blast hammered at his face, driving crystalline shards into exposed flesh. He braced himself. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. The wind chanted a desolate lament, a constant memento of his solitude. The lulls held a more sinister threat, a dense, oppressive stillness that stole the very breath from his chest, broken only by the frantic drumbeat of his own pulse. Buster never strayed far, not willingly, unless a genuine peril had driven him. The idea chilled Fitzwilliam more profoundly than the Arctic wind. What terror could have scattered him so? His renewed call cracked with desperation. "Buster! Please, boy, come back." He found himself kneeling in the drifts, the cold insinuating itself through the thick wool, quick as venom. Despair, a frigid serpent, coiled around his heart. Had he lost him irrevocably to this vast emptiness? A memory surfaced, vivid as a dream, of the day they'd met. It felt like eons ago, in a time when his own existence seemed sturdier. The pup had been a scrap of life, fitting easily within the hollow of his hands. Abandoned, trembling, half-submerged in a roadside ditch near Oakhaven. His fur, a tangled tapestry of brown and white, clung to his emaciated frame. Yet his eyes shone with a sharp, hopeful intelligence. Fitzwilliam hadn't sought a canine companion. He struggled to feed himself, let alone another creature. But those eyes, they echoed his own profound loneliness. He gently lifted the pup, cradling him within his coat, and carried him back to his Spartan room above the livery. Mrs. Higgins, the livery owner, had greeted him with tuts and grim predictions of the trouble to come. Unfazed, Fitzwilliam tenderly cleaned the pup, offered him morsels of food, and patiently nursed him back to vitality. He christened him Buster, a name synonymous with strength and reliability, qualities he hoped the small dog would embody. Buster had repaid his kindness 1,000-fold. He was loyal, keen-witted, and relentlessly protective. He was Fitzwilliam's constant companion, his confidant, his only kin. He recalled Buster's first attempt at a bark, a fragile, squeaky sound that had elicited a rare laugh. He remembered teaching him to retrieve, the countless games of tug-of-war with a tattered rope, the enthusiastic greetings he received each evening, complete with a wildly wagging tail and an exuberant, full-body wiggle. These cherished memories, once a source of solace, now felt like the cruelest torment. He had welcomed Buster into his life, vowed to protect him, and now he was gone, lost, abandoned to this frozen wasteland. The daylight was waning, the driving snow obliterating the horizon. Fitzwilliam understood he couldn't remain stationary for much longer. The cold was an insidious enemy, leeching warmth, stealing resolve. He had to press on for the sake of the town, for the medicine he carried, and for Buster. With a monumental effort, he regained his footing, his muscles protesting vehemently. He inhaled deeply, the frigid air searing his lungs. He would find Buster. He had to. He wouldn't forsake him. He resumed his trek, retracing his faint earlier footprints, each step a Herculean effort against the mounting snow. He cried out Buster's name once more, his voice raspy and barely audible against the storm's fury. Only the protracted silence remained. Echoes in the storm. The wind keened a mournful song, its desolate notes reverberating within Fitzwilliam's very soul. Each blast threatened to tear the vital medicine from his grip, each snowflake felt like a shard of ice piercing his skin. "Buster," he cried again, his voice ragged with exhaustion. "Where are you, boy?" Only the wind's lament answered. He pictured Buster, tiny and defenseless, swallowed by the white wilderness, and guilt surged anew. He should have leashed him, been more vigilant. His single-minded focus on reaching town with the medicine had jeopardized the one creature he cherished. Then, cutting through the gale's persistent shriek, a sound, faint, almost imaginary, yet undeniably real, a bark. Fitzwilliam stilled, every nerve alert, his heart hammering. Was it a cruel trick of the wind? A phantom born of desperation? He held his breath, straining. There it was again, the bark, clearer, sharper, infused with urgency. It was Buster. A fragile spark of hope flared within him. He stumbled forward, ignoring his protesting muscles, his gaze sweeping the tempestuous white void. "Buster. Here, boy. I'm here." The barking intensified, growing more insistent, punctuated by excited yips. Then another sound, footsteps. Light, quick footsteps crunching through the snow. Something approached. Fitzwilliam peered ahead, his eyes stinging from the frigid air. The blizzard was a swirling curtain, blurring everything beyond arm's reach. He discerned only vague, shifting shapes in the blinding white. He tugged his scarf higher, shielding his face from the icy assault. "Buster," he roared, his voice hoarse. "Come on, boy. I'm here." Footfalls grew closer, the barking louder, frantic. A dark form began to materialize from the swirling chaos, slowly resolving into a smaller figure. It wasn't Buster. Disappointment, like a cold blade, pierced him. But even as despair threatened to consume him, he glimpsed another form behind the first, larger, moving with a familiar, loping gait. The first figure stumbled into view, a child no more than 7 or 8, swaddled in an oversized coat and a knitted cap pulled low. Their face was flushed crimson by the cold, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resolve. They clutched something tightly. Then Buster burst into view, barking with unrestrained joy, his tail whipping back and forth, snow clinging to his thick fur. He leaped at Fitzwilliam, bumping against his legs, showering him with icy spray. Fitzwilliam knelt, burying his face in Buster's fur. A tidal wave of relief washing over him, so potent it nearly buckled his knees. "Buster, you crazy mutt. I thought I'd lost you." Buster licked his face, whining with delight. Fitzwilliam glanced up at the child, who watched them with guarded eyes. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick. "Thank you for finding him." The child remained silent, clutching their bundle tighter. Fitzwilliam then recognized the bundle as a small, shivering rabbit, its eyes wide with terror. "Are you lost?" Fitzwilliam asked, his brow furrowed. "Are you out here alone?" The child nodded, their gaze flickering nervously at the raging storm. The storm, they whispered, their voice almost drowned out by the wind. I got lost. And I found him, they indicated Buster. He kept me warm. Fitzwilliam rose, his relief now edged with a growing sense of foreboding. A child alone, adrift in this blizzard, painted a desolate picture. He couldn't abandon them to its fury. Not after the terror of losing Buster, not after the harrowing minutes he'd just endured. What's your name? He asked gently. Elara, the child replied, a sliver of strength returning to their voice. Elara, Fitzwilliam echoed. Well, Elara, I'm Fitzwilliam. And this, he scratched Buster behind the ears, is Buster. We need to find you somewhere safe. Do you know which way home is? Elara shook their head, their lower lip trembling. I don't know. Everything looks the same. Fitzwilliam sighed inwardly. He faced a choice. He could press on towards Oakhaven, deliver the medicine, and hope that someone stumbled upon Elara. But he couldn't bring himself to leave a child to the storm's cruel embrace. Not after the scare with Buster. All right, Elara, he said, his voice resolute. We'll figure this out together. First, we need shelter. Then we'll find your way home. He glanced in the direction of Oakhaven, a barely discernible darkening amidst the swirling white chaos. His town, his people depended on him, but so did this child. He couldn't rescue everyone, but he could save her. He had to try. He extended a hand. Come on, he urged. Let's go. The stranger in the snow. The wind shrieked a mournful song, each icy blast a brutal assault on Fitzwilliam's weary spirit. He huddled Elara close, a meager shield against the tempest's rage. Every backward step chipped away at the precious time he had to save his town. Yet, the memory of Elara, utterly helpless and seeking warmth from the shaggy dog, remained too vivid to ignore. Abruptly, a shape coalesced from the white chaos seemingly conjured by the blizzard itself. Tall and draped in shadow, it possessed an almost ghostly quality in the fading light, its face hidden beneath a deep cowl. Fitzwilliam instinctively tightened his grip on Elara's hand, his pulse quickening. The figure moved with an ethereal grace, skimming across the snowdrifts as if they were packed earth. A bark, sharp and joyful, pierced the storm's lament. Buster! He bolted from the figure's side, a furry projectile of pure elation heading straight for Fitzwilliam. He launched himself, paws thudding against Fitzwilliam's chest, showering his face with enthusiastic licks, the wet, cold fur a welcome comfort. Buster, you crazy hound! Fitzwilliam knelt, burying his face in the dog's dense coat, a wave of relief briefly eclipsing the gnawing cold. He swiftly checked him for injuries, finding none. Elara gasped, drawing back. Buster, she exclaimed, rushing toward the dog. He turned to her, tail wagging fiercely, and she embraced him in a tight hug. As the dog calmed, Fitzwilliam shifted his attention back to the cloaked form, now a silent, enigmatic presence amidst the swirling snow. With deliberate slowness, the figure reached up and lowered the hood. It was Elara. But this was not the terrified, abandoned girl he'd discovered trembling by the snowdrift. This Elara exuded a quiet confidence, a steely resolve that belied her diminutive frame. The gale tossed strands of her hair across her face, highlighting the sharp planes of her cheekbones, the firm line of her jaw. I don't understand, Fitzwilliam managed, his thoughts struggling to reconcile the two versions of her. You did right to help me, she said, her voice ringing clear and strong above the wind's howl. But I cannot allow you to jeopardize your town for my sake. I know these mountains. But you're only a child, Fitzwilliam countered, bewildered. A subtle smile played on her lips. I am Elara, daughter of Kalen, guardian of the White Peaks. This is my realm. She swept her hand in a gesture encompassing the raging storm, the perilous landscape, the unforgiving wilderness. And I know a shortcut, a passage even the storm cannot entirely conceal. It will lead you back to Stagecoach faster than you can imagine. Fitzwilliam stared, his mind reeling. He had stumbled upon a spirit of the mountains disguised as a lost child. A shortcut? Through this maelstrom? Doubt began to fester. Could he trust her? Could he trust anyone in this cursed storm? Elara held his gaze, her blue eyes unwavering and steady. Trust Buster, she stated simply. He trusts me. Fitzwilliam glanced down at Buster, nudging his hand with a wet nose, his tail giving tentative wags. He did trust Buster implicitly, and Buster seemed entirely at ease with this new, assured Elara. He thought of the dwindling medicine, the pallid faces of his ailing townsfolk. He recalled the precious hours already squandered, the escalating desperation clawing at him internally. He considered the child he had rescued, and the woman she had revealed herself to be. All right, he conceded, his resolve hardening. Lead the way, Alara. Take us home. Alara nodded, a hint of genuine warmth flickering across her face. Follow me closely, she commanded, raising her hood once more. The path is treacherous, and the wind deceives. She pivoted and vanished back into the swirling snow, a small but resolute figure swallowed by the storm's enormity. Buster barked a single, vibrant sound, then bounded after her. Fitzwilliam inhaled deeply, the frigid air searing his lungs, and followed, the vital satchel of medicine a heavy weight on his back, a fragile hope newly kindled in his chest. A broken wheel and a helping hand. Alara, surprisingly powerful for one so slight, snatched the spare shovel from the sled's rear. Less admiring the wreckage, more moving it, old man. This blizzard isn't going to excavate us. Fitzwilliam blinked, the barb of old man momentarily dulled by her unexpected practicality. He accepted the tool, the frigid metal a sharp contrast to his warmed gloves. Silence descended as they labored, punctuated only by the crisp rasp of steel against the packed snow and the wind's mournful cry. Fitzwilliam concentrated on matching Alara's relentless pace, impressed by her surprising strength. Each shovelful was launched with efficient power, clearing a path through the drifts that had engulfed the stagecoach. Buster, sensing the renewed purpose, erupted in enthusiastic barks, his tail ablur as he darted between them, occasionally nipping at the displaced powder. His presence, a vibrant spark against the bleak white canvas, offered welcome respite from the biting cold and the overwhelming task. Just as the last of the snow was cleared from the stagecoach's wheels, a more serious problem reared its head. Alara halted abruptly, her brow creased with concern. This complicates matters. Fitzwilliam followed her gaze. The left rear wheel, still partly submerged, bore a distinct injury. A spoke had snapped cleanly, a jagged splinter protruding from the hub. The wheel, now structurally unsound, leaned precariously. Blast it all, Fitzwilliam muttered, frustration welling up. This wasn't a simple delay, it was a genuine catastrophe. He circled the damaged wheel, scrutinizing the brake. The wood was aged, vulnerable. The unforgiving cold and the snow's oppressive weight had finally proved too much. Can you repair it? He asked, his voice tinged with weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. Alara didn't respond immediately. She circled the stagecoach, her gaze lingering on every frozen inch. Then, to Fitzwilliam's astonishment, she reached into a concealed compartment beneath the driver's seat, her slender hands vanishing into the shadows. I may have anticipated certain eventualities, she replied, her voice muffled. After a moment's rustling, she reappeared, clutching a leather pouch. Unfurling it, she revealed a collection of tools, a miniature saw, a stout hammer, a keen chisel, and an array of metal pins and timber wedges. Among them lay several lengths of seasoned wood meticulously wrapped in oiled cloth. Fitzwilliam could only stare at the pouch's contents, his jaw slack. Where did you acquire all of this? Alara shrugged, her attention locked on the broken wheel. A guardian prepares for all eventualities. These mountains brook no weakness. Things fail. One learns to improvise. A fleeting smile touched her lips as she glanced at Fitzwilliam. Besides, the wood comes from a felled tree cured by the relentless mountain winds and snow. Stronger than any you'd find in a workshop. Fitzwilliam still struggled to reconcile the slight, seemingly delicate girl with the sheer resourcefulness on display. But do you even know how to operate these implements? He indicated the tools. I wouldn't be hauling them around for their charm, would I? Alara retorted, already selecting a piece of wood from the pouch. This will consume time. And demand your assistance. She paused, then added, unless you'd prefer a snowy interment. Spurred by her words, Fitzwilliam banished his disbelief. He didn't fully comprehend who or what Alara was, but he couldn't ignore her obvious capabilities and expertise. Time was dwindling. He had to place his trust in her. He had to believe this improbable alliance offered the best, perhaps the sole, chance of reaching Oakhaven in time. All right, he conceded, rolling up his sleeves. Tell me what needs doing. Alara, without a word, pointed to the shattered spoke. First, we excise the damaged piece. Delicately now, we mustn't splinter the surrounding wood. Then we shape a fresh spoke from this. She brandished the seasoned timber. It needs to be a seamless match. Even a hair's breadth off and the wheel is rendered useless. As they commenced, the wind continued its mournful song, snow swirling around them like restless specters. Yet, for the first time since the blizzard's onslaught, Fitzwilliam felt a tentative spark of hope. A fragile hope, easily snuffed, yet present nonetheless. He had a task to immerse himself in, a purpose to chase. And he had a most unlikely ally, a girl who seemed to hold both the understanding and the determination to defy the very elements. Against the odds. Hold it steady, Elara instructed, her voice surprisingly firm despite her small stature. Fitzwilliam, his fingers numb with cold, strained against the weight of the stagecoach. He grunted, muscles screaming in protest. Almost there. Elara, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of activity. She'd produced a surprisingly sturdy wooden peg from her seemingly bottomless satchel and was now carefully hammering it into the makeshift splint around the broken wheel spoke. The wind, though still fierce, seemed to momentarily abate, allowing Fitzwilliam to hear the sharp, rhythmic thud of the hammer against wood. Right, that should hold for now, she announced, stepping back to survey her work. Now, we need to reinforce it with the leather straps. Fitzwilliam, his breath clouding the air, watched as Elara deftly wove thick leather straps around the repaired spoke, securing them tightly with a series of intricate knots. He'd never seen anyone work with such precision, let alone a child in the middle of a blizzard. He still couldn't shake the feeling that he was dreaming. Where did you learn to do all this? He asked, more out of bewildered curiosity than suspicion. Elara didn't look up. Necessity, she said simply. Now help me tighten this buckle. He obeyed, fumbling with the frozen metal. He noticed her hands were red and chapped, yet they moved with unwavering certainty. He tried to ignore the gnawing guilt that he, a grown man, was relying so heavily on a child. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Elara declared the wheel repaired. It won't win any beauty contests, but it should get us to Oakhaven. Fitzwilliam straightened up, his back protesting with a chorus of pops. He looked at the patched-up wheel, then at Elara, and a grudging respect began to bloom within him. All right, he said, his voice hoarse. Let's see if this holds. He climbed back into the driver's seat, Buster jumping up beside him, his tail thumping weakly against the seat. Elara took her place beside the door, her small hand resting on the frame. With a deep breath, Fitzwilliam flicked the reins. The horses, initially hesitant, leaned into their harnesses. The repaired wheel groaned ominously, but it held. The stagecoach lurched forward, slowly at first, then with increasing momentum. They were moving. As they pressed on, a sliver of pale light pierced the swirling snow. The wind, though still biting, seemed to have lost some of its ferocity. Fitzwilliam squinted, trying to make sense of the shifting landscape. Look, Elara shouted, pointing towards a break in the storm clouds. There. Fitzwilliam followed her gaze. Through the thinning snow, he could make out a faint outline, a narrow path winding through the drifts, barely visible but undeniably there. It was a treacherous route flanked by towering snowdrifts, but it offered a chance, a way forward. It's risky, he muttered, his brow furrowed. One wrong move and we'll be buried. Elara fixed him with a steady gaze. We don't have a choice, she said, her voice resolute. Do we? He knew she was right. Staying put meant certain death. Taking the path, however perilous, offered a sliver of hope. He glanced at Buster, who whined softly, then back at Elara, her small figure silhouetted against the fading storm. He took a deep breath, the icy air burning his lungs. All right, he said, his voice firm with newfound determination. Let's do it. He urged the horses forward, guiding them towards the narrow path. The stagecoach swayed precariously, its wheels sinking into the soft snow. Fitzwilliam gripped the reins tightly, his knuckles white. The wind howled around them, a final, desperate attempt to deter them. But they pressed on against the odds towards the faint glimmer of hope that lay ahead. He didn't know what awaited them on the other side of the storm, but he knew with a certainty he couldn't explain that they were not alone. The wolves' challenge. The stagecoach groaned, a mournful sound swallowed by the vast, white silence. Each rotation of the mended wheel was a small victory, a defiant act against the blizzard that still raged around them, though with noticeably less ferocity than before. Fitzwilliam, his face numb despite the scarf wrapped tightly around it, gripped the reins. Buster lay curled at his feet, unusually quiet, a low whimper occasionally escaping him. The medicine bumped gently against Fitzwilliam's leg, a constant, reassuring presence. Elara, perched on the seat beside him, scanned the landscape with an intensity that belied her age. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky just before dawn, missed nothing. The wind whipped strands of her dark hair across her face, but she didn't flinch. We're entering the Greywood, she said, her voice barely audible above the wind's howl. It's different here. The trees are older, the air is colder. Fitzwilliam squinted, trying to pierce the swirling snow. He could just make out the skeletal shapes of trees, their branches laden with snow clawing at the sky. An oppressive stillness hung in the air, a sense of being watched. Suddenly, Buster lifted his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He strained forward, his gaze fixed on the shadowy woods ahead. Fitzwilliam followed his dog's gaze and saw them. Wolves. Not one or two, but a pack. Their eyes, like burning embers, gleamed in the gloom. They stood motionless at the edge of the trees, a silent, menacing barrier across their path. He estimated at least a dozen, their gray fur blending seamlessly with the snow-dusted landscape. The lead wolf, larger and darker than the rest, stepped forward, its lips curling back to reveal a set of terrifying teeth. Panic tightened Fitzwilliam's chest. He'd heard stories of wolf attacks, of travelers stranded and devoured by these merciless predators. He gripped the reins tighter, his knuckles white. He had a rifle, but reloading in this weather would be a death sentence. Elara remained calm, her eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. She didn't reach for a weapon, but instead pulled a small, intricately carved whistle from her pocket. It looked like it was made of bone. "Don't move," she instructed, her voice firm. "And don't make any sudden movements." Fitzwilliam swallowed hard, his heart pounding against his ribs. He could feel the wolf's eyes on him, cold and calculating. Elara brought the whistle to her lips and blew. The sound that emerged was unlike anything Fitzwilliam had ever heard. It wasn't a shrill, piercing whistle, but a low, mournful note that resonated deep within his bones. It seemed to mimic the wind itself, carrying a primal, unsettling quality. The lead wolf tilted its head, its ears twitching. The other wolves shifted uneasily, their eyes darting around. Elara blew the whistle again, this time varying the pitch and intensity. The sound became a complex series of calls, a language Fitzwilliam couldn't understand, but the wolves clearly did. He watched, mesmerized, as the wolves' behavior changed. The initial aggression seemed to fade, replaced by confusion and uncertainty. They began to whine, their tails drooping slightly. The lead wolf took a step back, then another. Elara continued to play the whistle, her fingers dancing across its surface. The sound filled the air, a strange, haunting melody that seemed to weave a spell around the wolves. Slowly, hesitantly, the pack began to retreat into the woods. One by one, they turned and disappeared into the shadows, their eyes still fixed on Elara. Finally, the last wolf vanished, leaving behind only the swirling snow and the echo of the whistle. Elara lowered the whistle and took a deep breath, her cheeks flushed. Fitzwilliam let out a shaky breath, his body trembling with relief. What was that?" he stammered. "How did you do that?" "They understand respect," Elara said simply, putting the whistle back in her pocket. "They were testing us, seeing if we were a threat. The whistle, it speaks their language. It tells them we mean no harm, but we are not to be trifled with." Fitzwilliam stared at her, awestruck. He had faced down blizzards and broken axles, but this was something else entirely. This child, with her strange abilities and her unwavering confidence, was more than just a guide. She was something extraordinary. He glanced down at Buster, who had settled back down at his feet, his growls replaced by soft whimpers. Even Buster seemed to recognize Elara's power. "We should keep moving," Elara said, her gaze already fixed on the path ahead. "The storm will return soon." Fitzwilliam nodded, his mind still reeling. He urged the horses forward, the stagecoach creaking back into motion. As they continued deeper into the gray wood, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were entering a world far stranger and more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. He stole a glance at Elara, her face set with determination, and a flicker of hope ignited within him. Maybe, just maybe, with her by his side, they could overcome any obstacle, even the relentless fury of the blizzard and the secrets hidden within the frozen wilderness. A town saved. The descent from the gray wood was treacherous, the snow-glazed path a liability beneath the stagecoach's wheels. Yet, fueled by a dawning hope, they pressed on, an energy even Buster seemed to share. He now sat erect, his earlier anxiety banished by a sharp awareness, his gaze riveted to the spiraling track ahead. The wind, though persistent, no longer lacerated, instead carrying a delicate whisper of wood smoke, a beckoning promise of hearth and home. As they negotiated one final curve, Oakhaven revealed itself, cradled in the valley like a half-remembered dream. Buildings clustered together, their windows emitting a fragile, wavering light. A handful of figures stood sentinel at the town's edge, their faces etched with concern and fatigue. A collective intake of breath swept through the group as the stagecoach clawed its way out of the swirling white. Mumbles of disbelief swelled into joyous cries as they recognized Fitzwilliam, swathed in furs, high on the driver's seat. Then they noticed Buster, his steadfast companion, unleashing a bark of welcome that reverberated across the valley. "He's back! Fitzwilliam's back!" They surged forward, faces aglow in the gentle radiance of lanterns. Hands reached to assist Fitzwilliam, their grip surprisingly firm despite their evident weakness. He nearly buckled, his limbs stiff from the protracted journey, but managed a feeble grin. "I have the remedy," he rasped, his voice strained yet clear. "It's here. We can save them." A tidal wave of relief crashed over the onlookers, their expressions shifting from despair to elation. They surrounded the stagecoach, gingerly extracting the vital consignment. Vials, nestled securely within cushioned boxes, were promptly distributed to those most in need. Fitzwilliam observed the medicine being administered, his heart drumming with a mix of deliverance and depletion. He noted Mrs. Abernathy, her complexion pallid and gaunt, accepting a vial with trembling fingers. He saw young Thomas, who always greeted him with a mischievous twinkle, down the potion with a wince. He watched the town healer, her eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights, meticulously documenting each dosage. As the first tendrils of dawn began to streak the heavens with rose and gold, a sense of serenity descended upon Oakhaven. Coughs subsided, replaced by soft, conversational murmurs. Feverish foreheads began to cool, and raspy breaths eased into calmer rhythms. The medicine was taking hold. Fitzwilliam leaned against the stagecoach, his body screaming in protest, his mind still reeling from recent ordeal. Buster nudged his hand, his warm exhalation a soothing comfort. He surveyed the visages of his neighbors, their eyes brimming with thankfulness and optimism. He'd done it. He had redeemed his town. Yet, amid the jubilant atmosphere, one figure remained aloof. Elara stood in silence at the periphery, her gaze locked on the distant peaks. She seemed to absorb the collective ease, the shared euphoria, but her expression remained unreadable. Fitzwilliam approached her, his heart overflowing with profound gratitude. "Elara," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. I can't possibly repay you." Elara turned to face him, her eyes reflecting an ageless wisdom. "The town thrives," she stated simply. "That is recompense enough." And then, without another word, she pivoted and vanished into the mountain's encroaching shadows. Fitzwilliam followed her departure, his heart filled with awe and wonder. She was an enigma, a natural force, a guardian spirit. And she was gone. The townspeople, noting Elara's exit, turned inquisitive eyes to Fitzwilliam. He merely shook his head, a knowing smile gracing his lips. Some mysteries, he understood, were best left undisturbed. Attention then shifted to Buster. Recognizing the canine's steadfast devotion and valor, the townsfolk lavished him with affection. Children embraced him, adults stroked his head, and even the most austere individuals offered a kind acknowledgement. Buster, reveling in the outpouring, wagged his tail with unrestrained delight. "He's a hero," someone exclaimed, and the sentiment was echoed by the crowd. "Buster the hero." Fitzwilliam knelt beside his dog, scratching behind his ears. "Yes, you are, boy," he whispered. "A true hero, you are." As the sun ascended higher, bathing Oakhaven in a golden glow, a celebration began to unfold. Tables were arranged, groaning under the weight of food and drink. Music filled the air, laughter danced through the valley, and the town's spirit was reborn. Fitzwilliam, encircled by friends and neighbors, raised a glass in salutation. To Oakhaven, he proclaimed, his voice resonant and clear. To hope, to fortitude, and to the eternal bond between a man and his dog. And as the crowd roared its approval, Fitzwilliam knew that Oakhaven wasn't merely rescued, but irrevocably transformed. They had confronted death, peered into the void, and emerged stronger, more durable, and eternally grateful for life's small mercies. And never would they forget the enigmatic stranger, the loyal dog, and the stagecoach buried under drifts that delivered them back from the edge.